Hey sightseers, it's Sightseeing Sally. I'm with
Meandering Marty.
And today we're checking out the northernmost point in Door County known as Gills Rock. And the reason we're up at Gills Rock is because we're going to dive into something a little bit different, sightseers, and that is we're going to explore something called Death's Door. You want to explain, Marty, what Death's Door is?
Well, from what I understand in this area here, this is where we're at, in this area here between the Bay of Green Bay and Lake Michigan, there's a couple hundred shipwrecks in the area. That's why they call it Death's Door.
Going back to the 17th century, so way back already, it was known as Death's Door because of how dangerous the water is in between Washington Island and another series of other small islands that are there, and the mainland here of what would become Wisconsin. It can actually be traced back to a single event during the Indian Wars. There was a group of Native Americans that lost their lives during a squall that came up on the lake. And from that point on, that passageway was known as Death's Door, at least on early maps of the area. Since Great Lakes maritime history is such an important part of Wisconsin's and even Door County's culture, we thought we'd check this out today. To kick things off, we're going to head over to the point where you can see exactly this passageway or strait where all these shipwrecks have happened over the years. We're now over up at Northport Pier, Visitor Center and Ferry Landing. This is where you go to get your ferry tickets so you can head on over to Washington Island. It is also where we can see the passageway known as Death's Door. If you look out beyond the breakwater, you'll see a series of islands. In between is the strait that runs. If you look way over there, that would be the Bay of Green Bay. This strait comes through this area here, and then of course off over that way is the waters of Lake Michigan. And it's within that strait or narrow passageway between the mainland and the shore of the islands that gets the name Death's Door. And for good reason. Along the shoreline here are a number of hidden shoals. Not only that, the weather on the Great Lakes, Lake Michigan in particular, can get some really wild and violent storms. Since we're here, why don't we go on inside and check out the visitor center and see if they have any information on Death's Door. Well, they've got some information boards over here. Wonder if they have anything on Death's Door. Oh, look. We crossed Death's Door. It looks like they have a really interesting article called The Legends of Death's Door, Crossing Between Fact and Fancy by Allison Vroman. That looks like an interesting article to read. Over here, you can see a better map view of the passageway that they refer to as Death's Door right here. This is Gills Rock, which is where we were at previously. We're now at Northport, and then that's the passageway, and then this island, this first island you come to is Plum Island, and then of course you end up over here at Washington Island. Just as a little side note, these pictures here are of the lighthouse and the keepers dwelling on Pilot Island. They've done a lot to preserve the history and maintain the island's cultural resources. Marty's signing us in here. Well, moving on, there is a museum that we want to hit up that gets more in depth on the history of that, along with a few other sites here, seeing as we are up at the very tip of Door County, of the mainland of Door County.
A strange object they got here at the museum is this life raft. I mean, to me it just looks like a raft that you'd see in the water that you'd dive off of. Apparently, this one here used to sit on top of the steamer Courtney Burton, on top of the pilot house, so in case it would sink, it would be on top, so it would be available. And another neat object is the ship air tunnel they have here. Now, I've never seen one up close this big. I've seen small ones, but this is pretty neat. See what it says here. The steel air funnel is known from the iron ore carrier Middleton. The ship was also known as Neshnanic, Gulfoil, and Pioneer Challenger. What do you think, Sally?
That's big. As you can see, the museum is dedicated to the shipwrecks of Door County. This photograph shows the Sardinia, which sank right off of Gill's Rock. And then over here you have some of the items that have been recovered from the shipwrecks, or from some of the shipwrecks. You've got medicine bottles, a cosmetics jar, a chain, an unidentified metal object, some dishes. But probably what's most interesting is this map of some of the shipwrecks that have happened around Door County. What's really nice is that they have this touch screen where you can go through and pick out one of the shipwrecks that's outlined on the map, and then actually view photos of the different wrecks. This one that I'm looking at is called the Grape Shot, and it happened in 1855. You can see up there on the map the bulb that's lit up. That's where that wreck happened, right in Port de Mort, or otherwise known as Death's Door. This here is an example of a lifeboat that the old ships, the large ships, would have carried. Due to the way they were built, they were virtually unsinkable. Which, if you've ever seen a storm on Lake Michigan, you'd find that surprising, because the waves just get huge. This exhibit is also really interesting. You can see some more items that were recovered from some of the shipwrecks that have occurred here, along with an example of what a diver would look like if they were out looking for them. At one time, it was great sport to go out and try and retrieve objects from shipwrecks. Now, the practice is internationally discouraged, and in many cases, illegal. Now, here's something I know that Marty would find really fascinating. This is an old fishing tug called the Hope. She made her last haul on June 11th of 1992, which really wasn't all that long ago. She was one of the fastest and hardest working fishing tugs on Lake Michigan. And unlike those ships, which lay at the bottom of the lake, she now sits here in the museum for tourists and sightseers to look at. Since we're in here, I'm going to point out a few things. These are the nets that they would have cast out to pull in and bring in the fish. Over here, you've got the steering, captain's wheel, and the place where they would have sat. And then you got the engine, which to me smells a lot like diesel, and a couple of portholes for you to look out. Now, interestingly enough, shipwrecks haven't been the only way that people have lost their lives crossing Death's Door. You can see from this museum display that 6 men drowned while trying to cross, driving their vehicle across the ice. Wow, that's really sad. It appears they were trying to take a shortcut across to Washington Island. All right, well, let's move on I don't want to spoil it for you by showing you every little bit of the museum. I do want to point out, however, that if you have interest in reading up on death's door, you can purchase a book here at the museum. They also have some books on shipwrecks of Door Peninsula, the lighthouses, and Great Lakes pirates. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Clarification, that's Great Lake pirate Dan Seavey. I've heard about him. He lived a pretty colorful life. I just want to point out, you can see, because the water is really clear today, all the rocks down there. One of the reasons, as I had mentioned earlier, that it's dangerous to traverse these waters is that the rocky shoals that you can't see necessarily when you're in a boat.
And I'm assuming that's because of the glare coming off the water, especially during the day.
And then at night, you aren't going to see necessarily because your vision's going to be limited to the amount of light your ship is throwing off, so...
Yeah, that would be a good point. At night, you ain't going to see them.
The other thing to point out is that appearances can be deceiving because when you're looking down, it doesn't appear to be that deep, but it's probably at least 12 feet down. And then when you add on top of it weather, bad weather, obviously today it's quite beautiful out here, quite calm. We're on the bay side, this is the bay side. But all those factors combined is what makes traversing through that strait so dangerous. Well, since we're here, and I know how much you all enjoy sightseeing, I thought we'd take a little side detour to check out some of these shops. This one here is called Simply Scandinavian. And over here we have Evie's Craft Shed. Lots of cute stuff in there. Fortunately, I didn't feel like I needed to open up the old wallet. It seems Marty has spotted something over here in the bushes. Oh look, it's an old telephone booth.
And if it wasn't originally here, it was put here a long time ago because that's an old slab it's sitting on. But the phone's gone.
I'd say we crawl inside for a photo op, but I'm not so sure I want to sneak through the bushes here.
It's full of spiders.
Yeah, we'll pass. Compared to some of the other Door County towns, Gills Rock doesn't have quite nearly the amount of tourist attractions. However, there's one thing here that I definitely think we ought to check out, and that is Charlie's Smokehouse. Smelled really good, but unfortunately, they're already out of the fresh catch or the smoked fish using freshly caught fish off the lake. So I decided to pass on getting anything. Before we go any further, I have a couple of quick shout outs I want to give. First, I want to say thank you to those of you who have recently tipped our tip jar. That would be Robbie and Ruth from Louisiana and Gregory from Minnesota. And then I'd also like to say thank you to Grover's Corner for becoming our latest patron on Patreon. I'd also like to say thanks to those of you who recently tipped our tip jar by hitting the super thanks here on YouTube. And then last, but certainly not least, I'd like to give a shout out of thanks to those of you who've become Sightseeing Sidekicks. Thank you so much. We really appreciate all your help in getting us out to these awesome and lovely places throughout our own state and, of course, across America. You can see up here at Gills Rock, it's a little bit of a slower pace than some other areas of Door County. I imagine in summer it probably gets a lot busier, like the major Door County towns, but this is definitely more my speed. I I have a hard time with all the hustle and bustle. It gets to be a bit overwhelming, which is why we often choose to film these more quiet, out of the way places. Anyways, I wanted to point out the Harbor Light Inn. It's one of the many places that you can stay at throughout Door County. Personally, I think this is one of the more charming places that you can find up here, especially if you're looking for a more nautical themed or unique facade. I just want to mention that I personally haven't stayed here. It's just one of those places that really caught my eye. A couple more sights to see up here before we move on. Weborg's Dock, where you can get fresh fish, paddleboards, boat rentals, docks, and a ramp. It's $5 to launch your boat here. You put your money in the envelope and in the lockbox below. Other than the sound of what I believe is a refrigeration unit, it's quiet. It's like all the tourists have gone home and I'm the only one walking around here. Kind of nice, actually. Now here's something uniquely Door County that I have never seen before. It's Emily's Art Cart, a self-serve art cart with handmade goodies that were all made in Door County. Being that I'm a small business owner myself, I always like to support those small businesses. So why don't we take a quick peek and see what she's got. Looks like she's got an assortment of cute items here. Here we go. I think I discovered my purchase for the day. Thank you, Emily. Well, Marty, what do you think?
What?
You paying attention to the road?
Barely.
Anyways, I was wondering what you thought. Should we continue on or should we call it a day?
Well, it's getting late. Let's call it a day. And if people like it, leave a comment. And there's more small towns in Door County.
That's right, there are. So if you're interested in seeing more of Door County and some of its touristy spots, let us know. Until next time, it's Sightseeing Sally.
And Meandering Marty.
And Mocha. And Leo too.